Welcome to the garden question and answer video that I do on Sundays. You can ask gardening questions down in the comment section below this video, and that's where we pick from each week. Steph wrote down 23, and there were 25 more questions than this that were actually written down. So quite a few. Thank you guys so much for participating. And now we have some extra questions moving forward as well. When we were coming back from Europe, I asked, for lots of questions, and you guys asked great questions, and I probably confuse people a little bit each week, and so some of the questions are sometimes follow-ups to me confusing them. But again, thank you so much for participating. We actually have enough for an extra garden question and answer video at some point, likely. Okay, this is the last day, I think, as you're watching this, of the $50 off the weekly garden planner. If you watched yesterday's video, I put up, I showed the garden planner that's part of that, and talked about garden mapping in this garden. If you haven't watched that video, there was also a video earlier in the week. If you haven't watched the video from Rotterdam, from Trompenberg garden in Rotterdam, there's fairly low view count on that video. But if I was going to suggest one of the videos that we've done in the last few weeks, that would be one. That garden is unbelievable. A lot of the collection at that garden was done in the 1800s and before. It's an older garden than that. But when they went out kind of international collecting, a lot of it was done in the 1800s, and a lot of the collecting was done in North America. So it's a lot of our North American native plants that have been in the ground for a long time and been protected and watered and gardened with. And so there's like these incredible specimens of North American plants. It was kind of fun. We could have shot there forever. I had whatever time I had, at that moment in the city before we had to leave, and I would love to have spent more time in that particular garden. So if you haven't seen that video, it's one that I would suggest. And thank you for people that did watch it. It's all positivity down at the bottom, just about, wow, it is amazing, an amazing place. And also Stephanie thanks everybody for her birthday greetings over the last couple of weeks. Thanks for that. All right, let's jump into some questions. So this person said some of the large-scale shade trees have been bred to be narrow or fastigiate columns. What is my opinion? And what are some of the better selections? So yeah, there are a lot of selections for narrow, upright trees out on the market now. I like them because, again, I think lots are smaller in general, and so it's kind of difficult sometimes to make a decision for a shade tree that's going to get potentially, as wide as it gets tall, in the future, or 2/3 as wide as it gets tall. If the tree gets 80 feet tall and all of a sudden it's 50 or 60 feet wide, like this white oak is above my head up here, so it is nice to have options for narrower trees. And I do like to have some high things out here in the garden. Despite this being a small garden, we do have a number of larger growing things out here, but they're all, lots of them are narrow, upright pieces. And we have a Tokyo Tower Kyananthus, or Chinese fringe tree. Some of this is breeding where they're selecting for narrow, narrow seedlings basically, or they're crossing them with one that's already narrow. But a ton of it is just where one particular branch was on a plant. So it was just kind of a chance happening, a cutting basically off of a plant, and then it was grafted to make sure it kept that. They cloned it and kept that narrow habit that it had. So some of it we'll call breeding, and some of it will be, wow, I got lucky and found a super narrow plant. One of those narrow plants that was just found was slender silhouette sweet gum. So the super, super narrow sweet gum that we see more and more of all over the place. I highly recommend that plant. I did that video of a landscape architect using them down in Fairhope, Alabama a few years ago. If you saw that video, and he had those narrow, slender silhouette sweet gums spaced out in a formal garden. It was really quite a cool spot. But I saw the photo of the original plant that was found, and it's literally like a telephone pole of a slender silhouette. Now, once you have that, you can take that and then do crosses and find other versions of it. So I know that there's like a dwarf version of that slender silhouette coming. I don't know if it's going to be mass marketed because I don't know what but a friend of ours who does plant breeding showed us a photo of one that's like this tall and about that wide. It's the coolest little plant, it's the coolest little sweet gum you'll ever see. and it's like in 5 or 6 years. So I don't think any growers, it won't be mass grown, but it'll be one of those specialty plants that you'll find. But you know, they wanted to know some of my favorite, that Princeton Century ginkgo. I think we've showed that at the Greensboro Arboretum. I think it was at the Greensboro Arboretum not that long ago. So it's an upright, narrow ginkgo is one of our favorite. Carpinus fastigiata is upright, narrow Carpinus. There's a Perodia. What is that Perodia called? Persian Spire. That's the name of the Perodia. Perodia is one of probably a pretty underused tree in our landscapes overall. And I'm trying to think about what else. Oh, that Quercus robur, that narrow upright, that fastigiate Quercus robur, that one's all over the place. And there's a bunch of them, of these narrow trees over at the Ralston. And as I'm standing here trying to remember the names of them, I'm not going to remember all the names of them. There's a Quercus palustris too over there that's super, super narrow, but I'm not going to remember the name of it. Okay. Number 2, a green pillar. That's the name of that. The name of that one. But anyway, there's a ton of upright, narrow trees. Fun. Can mullygrass be divided? It's gotten too large. People say no, but if yes, when? They're in Charleston. Yeah, it can absolutely be divided. It's kind of funny when sometimes I'll get these questions. It's like, I heard that it's hard to divide such and such, but the way mullygrass is actually done in a nursery is it's divided, typically, is how they're actually created. So yes, you can definitely divide them. Pretty much all of the selections of mullygrass, the named ones out there in the world, not just the straight species, but the named ones are all divided. They have to be cloned that way. So yes, you can absolutely divide them. You need to divide them in the late winter before the new growth starts. That's kind of the prime time to do it. But you can pop them out of the ground and divide them. Can you compost leaves with black spots on them, maples, etc.? So if you have a hot compost, you're actually composting, meaning you're bringing the temperature up where you can kill seeds and you can kill disease-related issues. Absolutely, you can compost them. I would compost any organic material in that situation. For me, though, I don't have a hot compost place here. I typically just pile things up and let them break down, and I call that a cold compost, which actually works. But in a cold compost situation, I'm not going to be eliminating weed seeds. I'm not going to be eliminating disease things, and so it's not for that kind of composting. So that's the question. If you have a real compost system and you're turning it and you're building up heat in it and you're getting enough heat to kill those things off, then absolutely. You can throw whatever in there, organic material. Let's see. Carolina Midnight Loropetalum and Royal Purple Smokebush faded this year to ugly green. Is it transplant shock? Do they need some shade? What causes this? Okay, so this is kind of interesting. The way leaves are layered, sometimes you're looking at this gold Florida Sunshine Alyssium behind me. You're looking at a green Alyssium back there. There are various colors, various variegations. Here's a variegated Pittosporum leaf. You can see right there where that kind of creamy white is showing on there. These leaves are layered, and so you have kind of a single cell layer right on the top, and then a single layer cell just below that, and then a thicker area right in the center of the leaf. The way those layers are stacked will determine frequently, what you're seeing in the leaf. So this variegation, when that variegation's out on the edge like that, typically that's in the second layer down. Actually, the Ralston did a video on variegation a couple of weeks ago if you want to learn a little bit more about that. But their kind of midweek program, I think, was mostly on variegation. But you can see it. I thought it's an interesting thing how, the layering of the leaves. The plants that have a kind of a genetic predisposition to being purple on the outside, those purple colors are created by anthocyanins. Sometimes purple will show up in plants when they're under stress, and you'll get, purple shows up because of problems, that are happening with the plant. But the plants that we buy that we intentionally want to be purple, Loropetalum being one of those, typically, or they're green foliage varieties as well, but most of the time we're buying them as purple, or purple smoke bush, purple leaf red bud, purple leaf plum, all of those. Some summers you'll see them go virtually green. Sometimes it'll be for year after year after year. For some folks, maybe in the deep south, and for others it might be the occasional year. But those that plant creating those anthocyanins that can be basically for sun protection, potentially. You don't really know why they were originally created in that plant, but for whatever reason they're there, and we buy the plants based on that. They come at an energy cost. So think about, I think I said this recently, when it's about 75 degrees outside, most plants are kind of peak photosynthesizing. That's like the perfect temperature for the plant to photosynthesize and produce energy, produce sugars, to feed itself. When it goes past 75 degrees to 85 degrees, and probably most of them are okay, when it hits 95 degrees, 100 degrees outside, all of a sudden the plant can no longer photosynthesize properly and make enough food. And so at some point, that plant has to decide what it's going to sacrifice. Does it sacrifice defense against insects and disease problems? Does it sacrifice those anthocyanins that keep that purple color in the leaf? What is it? It has to sacrifice something at that point. And so a lot of times the plant will go into just kind of like, okay, I'm not going to produce those purple pigments or those red pigments right now. I'm going to, just go like into this stasis and kind of protect myself from other things that you would protect themselves from. Or they'll open their stomata and start blowing basically water out around it to cool itself, and that process is going to burn energy as well. So it's really the plant has a lot of energy at 75 degrees and a lot less energy at 100 degrees, depending on where it evolved. Obviously, some desert plants are probably not going to experience this, but plants from temperate areas, like Loropetalum would be in China, are going to pay a price at a certain temperature. And so some years you're going to see them lose a lot of that purple color because they're giving it up. But I thought it's an interesting question, and you'll see that frequently in some of these purple leaf plants that they'll lose colors. But again, those anthocyanins have an energy price, basically. And so the plant has a certain amount of energy that it can use. Is it going to cool itself? Is it going to protect itself against insects and diseases? Is it going to, what's it value the most? And so some summers it's going to, value that purple color a lot less. Okay. And then next question's about a purple smoke tree. Bolting. The branches are from about 12 feet in a single they cut it down to 2 feet. It grew to 12 feet in a single season, and they're all wispy. Same thing happened with ours out by the road. I gave ours one reset pruning, decided, if it came back and it looked good, it'd be fine. And it bolted like that, like 10 or 12 feet, and was super thin. I probably could have then taken about half of that growth off and just kind of, for every 8 foot it grows, I can take 4 feet off again and see if I could have gotten it back in position. But ours was just in too much shade. So that was the main reason it was stretching. My neighbors on the other side of their red maple over there is full and nice and looks perfect. It's getting more sun than ours was. And so I just took it out based on that. For me, they ultimately want a 15-foot screen that's not wispy mess. So you could try to so if it went from 2 feet to 12 feet, you could try to cut it back maybe to 4 or 5 feet this next year and do that year over year and see if you can get that branching more organized. But in all likelihood, it's either in too much shade or... Another thing is the root system's so big on that plant that when you cut it back, it was able to really put on crazy amounts of growth, probably without stopping some of that growth and making it branch. That ultimately is the reason it stretched out so much. But you can try, again, take off half the growth every year and see if you can reorganize it or get rid of it. Okay, 1-year-old Coosa dogwood did not flower this year. It's only 1 year old, so yeah, give it more time. I get a lot of questions like this. These are really good questions because I think this is one of the things that can discourage people gardening. You can plant a lot of things a lot of people just have whatever weekend they have is what the weekend they have. And so I would be at the farmer's market, and obviously the bulk of my sales were in the spring and then some in the fall. But I'd get the occasional person July 20th that comes in and loads up an entire pickup truck load of plants to go plant. And that was the weekend they had, right? I mean, people get the weekend they've got and they're motivated. Maybe they're bought a new place, whatever it is, and they just want to do it. Snow on the ground or, or 95 degrees, whatever. This is the weekend. And they're buying plants for it. Those kinds of, but then you can end up discouraged potentially because some of those plants are probably going to take that hard, potentially. And then understanding that newly planted things are going to take a minute sometimes. There are plants that you can put in the ground in your garden and they just hit the ground, they're going to grow, and you're never going to explain it to yourself because why would you? It's doing well. Why are you even, you're just like, yeah, it's looking good. It's the things that have problems and don't bloom the first year or second year or have weird things going on. And those are the plants you kind of learn from, because people just don't pay attention to the things that are going right. They tend to find the negative, things that are going on and kind of focus on those. It's just, I think, the nature of being a human. But 1-year-old plants, 6-month-old plants, they're not going to perform like they're going to perform in the future. Plus, you may have had a particularly dry period or wet period or hot period or cold, whatever. So don't worry about those first year kind of things. Just make sure you're keeping it average moisture and continuing to work on your soil. Things will work themselves out. So elephant ears are invasive and hard to rid in this person's area. So when you think about this, there's lots of us every year that go out and buy elephant ear bulbs or have them in our gardens here, like in Raleigh. They're not invasive at all. They're we get big, beautiful elephant ears here if they're getting enough moisture. We've got one over here. If you came to the open garden, we've got a really nice one over there that gets moderately sized, and there are some areas in the country, Steph and I have ridden our bicycles along paths down in Louisiana where the ditches are elephant ears as far as you can see. Unbelievably invasive for some people. This person's neighbor planted them and they're in an area where they're super invasive. Do they need to spray them? Well, the only way to get rid of them is that you either have to dig them out or spray them. I mean, that is your two choices. I don't think you can try to hack them off, and deny them food, but that's a stored energy source under the ground. So it's going to try to come back, repeatedly from that. So for me, I'm probably going to spray them. I mean, I just don't see any other way. You'd just be digging them, constantly otherwise. But if they're, I don't know. That's a really tough question, and one of those things where it's one of the things I dislike about things like, I've got all this English ivy behind me, somebody else's property back there. It really is annoying to have someone else's, issues constantly creeping in. I do a lot of consultation work and I see it all the time, that this one person's vinca or English ivy, or in this case, elephant ears, is the other neighbor's, nightmare. It's not fun. Let's see. This person has massive perennials this year. What is the best time to divide and transplant? So you can, as soon as they go dormant, a lot of times, so the things that aren't water sensitive, winter water sensitive, I would divide them in the fall because I can still see where they died back. Like these hosta back here behind me. Once it dies back to the ground, I'll still be able to see it because I can see the leaves are still there. That's the best time for me to pop that plant out of the ground and divide it, I think. But I can do it all the way through the rest of winter and probably even into early spring next year as they're emerging from the ground. I can still do it. But I think fall is probably best. Things that are water sensitive, and I think grasses are probably in that category. So the person who asked about dividing the mully grass, I want to do that in the late winter because I feel like some of these things when they're dormant, they don't really like water all that much. And so if you think it's water sensitive in some way, divide it in the late winter. The rest of anything else that's pretty tough out in your landscape, that pulmonaria back there, even these hellebores, hosta, ajuga, a lot of these things that are kind of tougher perennials, I'll just do them in the fall. Okay. Let's see. This person, they're in North Carolina. Their average first frost date is 11/15, so November 15th. What is the last day they can plant evergreen shrubs like Alyssium? You can plant 12 months out of the year in eastern North Carolina. And, you know, normally we have a pretty dry fall here in North Carolina. So really, I'd want to wait until the kind of moisture comes back would be peak time to plant for you for fall. I would call fall planting for you 11/15 when you get that frost. So as long as the plant's been outside and it's not been, doesn't have it covered in new growth or whatever, I'm planting that thing, you know, right through the winter. I don't think you're going to have a problem unless it comes out of a greenhouse and goes in the ground. Then it could be stung by cold because it hasn't experienced any cold. But if it's grown outdoors and you're buying it locally down there, there's no last day to plant in eastern North Carolina. So number 10, this person is in Paradise, California. Remember the campfire that happened in Paradise, California, and that was all the way back in 2018. I had to look that up after read this question. I can't believe it's already been like 7 years since that massive fire in Paradise happened. They have an olive tree that looked like it was dead to the ground all the way, and it's come back from the roots. And so it's come back shrubby with lots and lots of suckers, basically, from the bottom. Should it be left shrubby, or should they try to prune the shoots to focus a single leader? Would the shrub produce olives? They really want to preserve it. So it typically takes about 5 years to fruit an olive. So, you know, it's going to be less because you have a root system underneath it that can push things up. But typically, okay, so if you think about the way like blueberries are pruned, you know, they go in and take out about 1/3 of the oldest wood every year from the bottom of them, because once you get a number of canes, they're actually just competing against one another a little bit. So they're competing for light, they're competing for energy, they're competing for water out there especially, right? So I don't think you get away with having a plant that has, you could get away with the plant being fine, you know, it'll be fine. But in order to get fruit on it, I don't think you're gonna be able to have a plant with 20 suckers like that, or whatever, however amount of suckers, you know, that are coming up from the base. So I don't know that you need to focus it down to 1 necessarily. You could focus it down to 3 hardy ones if you wanted to grow it as a multi-trunk tree, or you could get it down to 1. 1 scares me, you know, going in there and starting to prune on it and getting down to 1 is like, would be a little frightening to me. So probably I would go down to, you know, you could start taking out half, you know, and then you could take out half again once you get some height on it. You can start to thin it down, but ultimately kind of have your eye on 3 or 1, you know, that you want to be the main leader. But I think it'll take you several years to re-fruit the plant. But I don't think you'd ever get fruit on it if it was just that many suckers. And then again, that's the way most fruit farming is done. There's a lot of thinning of the plant to make sure that, you know, the plant's not putting energy into so many different things that it can't concentrate on fruiting. Okay, let's see. What is the variety of Mahonia next to the osmanthus, the variegated osmanthus in the front garden? It's called Silver Caress. Should be some availability on it this next year. This is soft caress right back here behind me in this container, which is super soft textured. Silver Caress is similar to it, but it has a silver hue. It's a slightly larger leaf. I really like that plant. I mean, as Mahonia goes, that Silver Caress, we've had those out there for close to 2 years now, trialing them while nurserymen have been building numbers on them. Nurserymen are pretty excited about that plant. I think they'll be pretty widely available in the next couple years for sure. What are my favorite abelias, considering them for foundation planting in St. Louis? Let's see, full sun to part sun. So you got the right conditions for them. So we have several dwarf abelia in this garden. I've got Miss Lemon, I've got Radiance. Radiance has now gone into a series called the Suntastic series. So it's Suntastic Radiance, Suntastic Pink, and Suntastic Peach. I think Suntastic Pink is my new favorite. That thing is really, really nice out in the front garden there. And it's flowering like crazy. Mentioned it in a video a week or so ago. The Back to the Garden video, maybe. I think that's the video that it was in, but we showed that Suntastic Pink. Suntastic Peach is out by the road, and just it sounds kind of got an orangey color to it. But that's probably my favorite. My absolute favorite abelia is just Abelia chinensis, the straight Chinese abelia, which is the parent plant for a lot of the breeding around abelia. But to me, it's actually the best of the abelia. Weirdly, you know, it was used in the breeding to create a lot of the hybrid abelia that we grow in our gardens all over the place. And then for some reason, it was no longer used as much. You can get it. I mean, it's available as a kind of a specialty plant, but there's giant, much bigger clusters of flowers on Abelia chinensis, and the butterflies go crazy for it. If I had Abelia chinensis out here versus every other plant in this garden that's for butterflies, native, non-native, I don't care what it is, that Abelia chinensis would have the most butterflies on it. So I don't have one. I probably should get one just so that I can show that off on a yearly basis, but that's my actual favorite abelia. But for one of the dwarf compact foundation type ones, probably Suntastic Pink. Real quickly, you can see the purple color really held up in my Carolina Midnight Loropetalum over here. But the root, look how protected the roots are here. I don't know that you can't see all the way down to the ground, but I've got a ton of plants planted around this thing. And so it has a lot of protection. It has a lot of ability to, you know, not go under the stresses from the heat or being dry or whatever it is. That companion planting around it definitely helps it out. Got another Loropetalum along the edge of the driveway over there that was newly planted this year, and it's a little more open space, a little sunnier over there actually as well. And it's greened up quite a bit. Like 2/3 of the center of the plant are green. But things will fill in over there. It'll start to shade its own roots, and it'll have less of that greening in the future. Okay. This person received a Japanese maple mail order with only one long stem. Should they tip prune it to help get some lateral branches? Yeah, at the height that you want to start getting that branching is where you can cut it in the spring. A lot of times when they go dormant though, when they flush out in the spring, they'll start to branch at that time. So you may see that you're getting some branching. You know, you may see some buds along those stems already at this point, where some of that branching is going to happen in the spring, regardless of whether you cut it. But you can definitely cut it. Be careful not to cut it down. If it's an upright one, I mean, I really want the branching kind of as high as I can get. That Tokyo Tower Kyananthus, I lifted up. There's not a branch below this. You know, my hot blonde Japanese maple over here, I've limbed it up to where the first branch is here. So I kind of don't mind that single stem a little bit, because I don't want the branching, you know, down at 2 feet off the ground. It may look okay as a small plant, but how is that going to look when it's a 15-foot tall or 18-foot tall plant to be branched 2 feet off the ground? So careful with that. Careful with what you wish for. I kind of want the branch, if it's an upright Japanese maple, I kind of want the branching, which it sounds like it is. I kind of want the branching about this high anyway. I don't want to be walking into limbs around the plant or taking up too much ground space in the future. This person wants Taxus media, densiformis. They're in zone 8B and the tag says 5 to 7. What can be done to help success? Wishful thinking, question mark. Yeah, it's pretty hot in the south for some of these yews. We do have yews that are at least a yew that's native to the southeast United States. You know, I'll try anything. We have all kinds of conifers in this 8A garden that are only to zone 7. So if you looked at the tag, they say zone 3 to zone 7. Now, those same conifers are actually grown in Portland in zone 9A or 8B, 9A. So it depends on where you live too. So if a tag says 3 to 7 on a conifer, the Pacific Northwest, you know, Seattle is zone 9A, I think. So think about that, and these conifers, it would grow there in all likelihood. So but they have to write the tags for the people in the eastern part of the country because there's so many people so it would depend on where you are in zone 8B is my point. But a zone 8B in the southeast United States, which I'm assuming is where this person is, it's going to be much tougher. to grow that. That plant's going to need some shade, even if it says full sun on the tag, and it's probably going to need partners around it. So we have a Colorado blue spruce, and we have some pines here, several things. We have a lot of stuff in this garden that says it's only hardy to zone 7. But again, the stress from this Leucopetalum is having less stress on it because it's closely planted with other things. So that's a technique to use. If you throw it out in the absolute full sun and space it 3 to 4 feet apart from everything and have brown or black mulch underneath it, it's going to really struggle in the heat. And sometimes it's humidity based, and we can't do much about humidity. In this particular case, though, I think it's more heat based. This person travels with plants as they move across the country, mainly natives. Their car gets hot and swampy because, you know, that moisture from those plants gets in the air and you get dew on the inside of the car, which is kind of funny when you have plants inside of a car. Should they bring them into the hotel, into the AC, or what should they do while they're traveling? Say if you're traveling in a car with plants, they need some light, they need some sunlight. So if you get to the hotel early enough, I would get them set out beside the car, you know, for a little while and make sure that they're not going to be denied sun for a week or two I don't know how long you're traveling, but the plants do need some sun. If you deny them sun for 2 weeks and then stick them out in the full sun when you get home, you know, they have the potential to burn them. We travel, you know, in the van, and our shower and bathroom, our bathroom in the van ends up with plants in it, inevitably. We're heading out on a trip soon, and inevitably the shower will be full and we have to take the plants out to use the shower. But we put them outside when we can along the trip. I think the more important part here is that you don't have the windows rolled up and the heat building up in the car. It's okay overnight. I mean, what I would do is I would get to the hotel. Hopefully it's in a safe enough place that you trust that you can put the plants kind of around the car, watch them occasionally, or bring them, set them outside your room or whatever. I mean, outside. And then you put them back into the car once the sun is down overnight, and that should be fine. But for me, it's more about getting them out in the sun, which is what we try to do on the trip. If I left them in the shower, hummingbirds went right over. Oh, and there goes back that direction. It's not going to show up on the film, but right over my head. But I can't leave them in the dark for, you know, that long. Let's see. This person heard to take a soil test samples from multiple areas and mix them together and combine them together. What would happen? But what if you have 2 different landscape types, amended beds and then non-cultivated areas, or you have lawn? Should they get 2 separate tests? Yeah, I would just base it on, if you're moving into a new house and it's pretty much clay they pushed all over the place, you know, you could probably mix those samples together and get a general idea of what's going on in the soil. But if you have an area where, and this happens pretty frequently, they had the sand pile over there where they were doing the brickwork and they spread that out on one side of the lot. You know, for whatever reason, the back 30 feet of this property right here is pure sand. And everything else going this way is clay. It's not as, we've done a lot to work on it, but we've changed it quite a bit. But I mean, there's like a line in the sand here in this back garden where it's just pure sand back there. Something must have been pushed in there at some point. I mean, something was done in the history of this property right here where it's sandy back there. And so maybe those are probably 2 distinct places that I would take soil tests from. So just, you know, kind of use your, I don't think it's so much about a cultivated area versus a non-cultivated area. It's just, if you're looking at those soils and they seem similar, then I'm going to mix them together. If they seem dissimilar, I'm going to separate them into separate soil tests. But again, I don't want people also to get into the trenches to think that you can take this quarter and that quarter and that quarter and that quarter and put potassium over there and phosphorus over here and boron over there, and, you know, and get that right. That's never going to happen. Probably that you could, you know, you can dial in these spaces just perfectly. So, but if you have the 2 distinct soil types, get 2 soil tests or more. Does fertilizer go bad? They use organic fertilizer now, but they found a 3-year-old bag of 10-10-10. Does it lose strength? No, it doesn't necessarily lose strength, but a lot of times moisture will have gotten into the bag in time and started to break it down a little bit. And so what will happen sometime with those fertilizers is, so old-fashioned 10-10-10 was not slow release. I mean, when you threw it out, it just hit the ground running. You know, they weren't encapsulated. Newer versions of 10-10-10 tend to be encapsulated a little bit, or a little bit more controlled release, so they don't burn your crops super, you know. It releases over 3 months instead of instantly. Since it's only 3 years old, it's likely a little more controlled release. That controlled release part may have broken down on it at this point if it had any moisture in the bag. So when you throw it out, it could potentially burn your plants, is my point. What I would do with an old bag of fertilizer like that, I don't want to throw it in the trash can and have it go to the dump. I'd still like to use it, but I would want to put it out. I would want to make sure, number one, it doesn't have clumps. There's no clumpiness in it. So try to break it apart and get it without grinding it down, but try to make sure there's no clumps in it, because I don't want clump to land somewhere. But I would take a bag of 10-10-10 like that that's 3 years old, and I would, if the bag says it covers 1,000 square feet or 2,000 square feet, I want to put it over 10,000 square feet, okay? If that makes any sense. So I still want to use it, but I just want to make sure that I'm not going to burn anything in the garden. So if you have a wooded area or something like that, or you have some place where you can just distribute it far and wide, or maybe you don't have that much space and you can just use it over 2 or 3 seasons, but just be super careful to use far less of it than the recommended amount, because it may release super fast if it's gotten moist over time. But again, I don't want to throw it in the trash can. I would still want to make sure I brought some, you know, this has been all organic process, but I did have a few things left over from the garden center initially, and I had some soluble fertilizers that I used on containers, and I actually used a little bit of it on the sod when we had the 2 grass places out here in that first year. Leftover things from my garden center, I don't want to, you know, they're best not to go in the dump. Let the plants use them, turn them into carbon, you know, turn that product, turn the fertilizer into carbon and get it stored in the ground rather than sitting in a dump, you know, running out into the creek or stream in the future. Do organic fertilizers work the same in containers as they do in the ground? No, not really. I mean, you may have a container that just has great soil life in it, with earthworms and beetles and beneficial fungi and beneficial bacteria and all those things. It's just hitting all the sweet spots, but most of the time, no. The container goes through such heat and cold changes during the season and wet and dry condition changes during the season that you're not going to support the kind of beneficial life that fertilizer really needs to break down so properly and be used properly. But the liquid organic fertilizers, on the other hand, typically are more readily available nutrients in them. So if you just want to, if you're using organics on containers, I'd probably use a liquid product. Okay. So this is, I talked forever on fertilizer last week. Didn't mean to. When I went to edit that, and it was like 6 minutes on the first question. I didn't mean to talk that to death, but sometimes I do that. Somebody asked, I don't know if Steph included it in this. Somebody had asked if Steph is ever on the other side of the camera saying that's enough. She's not out here for these Q&As. She does write the questions down in the book, but the camera's on a tripod for these Q&As. I wouldn't ask her to stand here for 50 minutes or whatever holding the camera. But occasionally she'll throw up a 5 minutes on some other video where I've been, talking for 5 minutes. Griffin is having a conversation with a neighbor or something. Let's see. So this person asked, coming back around to the fertilizer question from last week, and I'll try to be short with this. They asked me my opinion on overdosing potassium on orchids. So there, just a conversation around some plants that if you put down too much of one nutrient, you lock up other nutrients. I talked about that last week. It's easy to, the more is better thing does not work in chemistry. Think about your soil as chemistry, as a chemistry set. This range of calcium is perfect. This range of boron is perfect. This range of potassium is perfect for this type of crop. I mean, we know these things. We've grown these plants and cultivated gardens for a long time, and so we know the ranges of these things. When things get outside of the ranges, you can have nutrient deficiencies if you have too little of it. And on the other end of the spectrum, if you have too much of something, sometimes it binds with other things and causes problems with the uptake of other things, where you have, I have plenty of calcium and magnesium. I have calcium and magnesium in the right ratio, but the potassium gets so high that it actually locks those up in some way. And so your pH can lock up iron and things like that. So you're, again, it's a chemistry thing, and so more is better is definitely not an answer. So do be careful with those things. And then of course there's internet rumors about things too. But I get questions about, dumping certain nutrients out in the garden. I want to put my coffee grounds on this particular plant forever. Well, that coffee grounds have nutrients in them, and so if you keep dumping the same nutrients, it's going to act like a fertilizer. If you keep dumping it on the same plant, it's going to put things out of whack. The beneficial thing that might be in the coffee grounds may also contain some other nutrient that could lock up some nutrient. You see in time how things can work. So if you're going to dump your coffee grounds in the garden, which is perfectly fine, distribute them far and wide, just like I said, the 10-10-10. Don't concentrate anything in any spot, because it could cause you a different kind of problem, by locking something up. But yes, good question. Yes, there are. Don't overdo and don't try to get in there and fix everything exactly perfect. Organic fertilizers don't have micronutrients. That was a comment I got from that conversation last week. So yes, that's organic fertilizers do have micronutrients. So if you read the label, I typically will use plant tone out here. I've always sold Espoma products and purchased Espoma products for my own garden. So most of the time you're going to see me using a Espoma product. There's other organic fertilizers out in the world. So don't promote Espoma, don't get a check from Espoma. Whatever. You do whatever you want to do. But so they don't have the micronutrients on the guaranteed analysis on the bag, because the issue with, so if I make a synthetic fertilizer, like let's say I make 10-10-10, and it's 10% nitrogen, 10% phosphorus, 10% potassium, and then I put micronutrients in it. I can put a tablespoon of boron and a teaspoon of calcium, and I can put what I mean. You can put the exact amounts in a synthetic fertilizer because you're making it, right? But in an organic fertilizer, you're going to source organic materials, which could be feathers, from a chicken. It could be all kinds of byproduct, bone meal products, all kinds of organic materials that could change one batch to the next. And so when they do their guaranteed analysis on the plant tone, what you're seeing is they guarantee the amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, maybe even calcium and magnesium. I can't remember. But there's like 5 things on their guaranteed analysis that they try to keep the same every batch. The 3 macronutrients and then a couple of the micronutrients that you need less of. Although calcium and magnesium kind of fit into a middle ground where I wouldn't call them micronutrients and I wouldn't call them macronutrients. They're really important. But the micronutrients aren't listed on the bag, but the cottonseed meal or chicken feathers or any of those, they absolutely contain micronutrients. They're just not guaranteed. They just can't put them guaranteed on the bag because one batch sourced from another one is going to have a different amount of boron or copper or iron or magnesium or nickel or zinc or whatever the other micronutrients that are necessary for plant growth. Because in small amounts, some of these, there's like 27 or something, kind of nutrients that we know plants need. They probably need more than that. But again, so to say that they don't have micronutrients is not accurate. They just don't put it on the guaranteed analysis like they would on a synthetic fertilizer, where literally it's mixed a gallon of this and 2 gallons of that into a batch, if that makes any sense. So, but they do have micronutrients. So that's not necessarily true. So UK gardeners sprinkle mycorrhizal fungi on roots to help transplant and root growth. Is this beneficial? They do it in this country too. Seems like every YouTube video of a plant going in the ground has, some sort of mycorrhizal starter going into the ground. I have never once inoculated a single plant with mycorrhizal in my entire 40 years in this business, and I guarantee you, this is the healthiest soil. It's full of mycorrhizal fungi. I mean, we can kick these paths back right now and I can show it to you underneath this, the fibrous system that's underneath my wood chip path. I showed it to people during the open garden. Just, you know, it's amazing to look at. It's in the air. It's everywhere around us. And my point has always been, if you're starting a new project and you're digging the first hole and you're planting the first plant, if you dump a bunch of mycorrhizal fungi in that bottom of that hole, especially like a foot down, it's always funny to me. Another thing is, like in this clay soil, pretty much nothing lives a foot down. So if you dump that at the bottom of the hole that's, you know, 14 inches deep or something, nothing's gonna live down there. Not even the roots on the bottom of your plant's gonna live down there. When you dig that plant up in 6 months, those roots will be dead on the bottom and they'd be spreading outward into the soil that has air in it. Okay, so it's definitely not beneficial to dump at the bottom of the hole, I wouldn't think, unless you had a soil that had air, you know, that deep down into the soil that's available for those mycorrhizal, because they're going to live mainly up in that top zone where it's not too wet, not too dry, consistent temperature. You know, that's where that stuff's going to live. With that said, if it makes you feel more comfortable, and I've said this for a long time, to, you know, put some of that stuff in the hole, if it makes you feel better, I've always challenged people who told me, I've always had great success using it, that I think you're just a good gardener. I think that you're probably just a good gardener, and whether or not you had put that in the hole or not, you were probably going to be okay with or without it. So no, I don't dump any of those things. Once you get your soil right, those things will all match up together. Okay, this is all about building soil. You can't jump ahead. It's like, you know, I'm going to clear off a bed, plant 9 plants, and then cover it in mulch, and I'll have put the mycorrhizal in there. Well, how's the mycorrhizal going to live? It doesn't have any other organic material. None of that mulch is broken down. None of that. It's this deep in the ground. If you follow, you know, what I see other people doing, none of that. I don't think it's overall beneficial, and it's definitely not beneficial to your wallet. Once that soil really starts working, those mycorrhizal relationships will happen on their own. But again, up to you guys. And again, somebody down below is going to say, it just helps me every time. And I challenge back to you, I think you're just a good gardener. A couple more for this week. Again, today is the last day to get the $50 off the weekly garden planner. Thank you guys who have bought it. Thank you for those who are considering it. Yesterday's video, I put some details about the garden planner part of the weekly garden planner in that video. If you want to learn more about that, if you're considering buying it, okay. And I'm working on other projects for that as well. So this person said, beyond compost, hardwood mulch, or organic fertilizer, my opinion on humic acid or humichar in the garden or on turf. They have 7 acres, extremely compacted soil near Boston. They've just converted 2,000 square feet of it and wood chipped it. So wood chips are the definite, you know, way to go if you have time. I mean, it's all about time. So my opinion on humic acid is something that naturally occurs with the process of breaking down, of things decomposing. So the wood chips that they've put down, mulch that you put down, compost that we are putting down in the garden, all those things. When through the process, humic acid is created. Humic acid these materials will help change the soil structure, you know, over time, which is what's happened in this garden. You know, when we put down the wood chips, and then the earthworms and everything else come up and down through that, and the mycorrhizal and the, you know, beneficial bacteria and all the things, you know, beetles and larvae and all kinds of things are breaking this material down. They're creating those things naturally. So it's up to you whether or not you can go in and put down a layer of compost and then put your mulch on top of that, you know, to recreate the forest floor much quicker. And you can use something like humic acid if you wanted to. You can basically build the forest floor back in one instant thing if your checkbook's big enough, right? That's the way that works. But putting down the wood chips will eventually do all those things anyway. So, you know, that humus layer, you know, down right on that top of that soil layer, you know, is going to build itself regardless with the process that you're already using. It's just going to take a little bit of time. But if you want to spray it over your turf, sure, it may be beneficial. But again, it's one of those things where, you know, I said this about the mycorrhizal, you know, all of these things are going to happen. If you continue to keep your soil covered, work on your soil, keep it consistently moist, plant the plants kind of reasonably close together, you know, kind of recreating how a forest operates, then, you know, at the end of the day, all these systems are going to work anyway, without your inputs. This person, last question for this week, this person had to transplant a butterfly bush in Charlotte in August. They're concerned about the water because they know they don't like it too wet. So I guess when you transplanted it, I don't know if you cut it back a little bit, because I definitely would cut it back. I would definitely cut it back some, but butterfly bushes are generally pretty easy to transplant, and transplant pretty regularly. You know, August would not being the time to do it, but sometimes we have to do what we have to do, right? I said the person leaving work, you know, is off a week in July and wants to do the landscaping. That's when they're going to do it. You know, if you have to move, or, you know, somebody's coming to do work on the house or whatever, sometimes plants have to be moved. Luckily, butterfly bushes are pretty resilient overall, and you know, it should absolutely be fine. But if it's wilting every day, be careful not to overwater it to get it to not wilt. You're best to just take off part of the top of the plant and put the plant back in balance a bit to the root damage you did to it. If you try to water it to its afternoon wilting, then you probably are going to end up, or potentially end up, overwatering it. I don't want to say guaranteed, but you could potentially overwater something when you're trying to water it because it wilts every afternoon. You're best to just kind of put it back in balance and take part of the top of the plant off. Okay, thank you guys so much. Ask gardening questions again down in the comment section below this video. We've got quite a few written down, and I'd love to continue to collect them. And we'll have an extra Q&A some week in the weeks coming up from that. So thank you guys. It's much cooler days here in Raleigh. We've been weirdest August, where, you know, normally we're continuing to suffer through 92, 95 degree days, that kind of thing. For some reason this morning it's 68 or 69 degrees out here, and it's only like 80 for the high, so we'll take it. Thank you guys so much for watching.